started. So welcome everyone. Welcome to today's event for La Familia Cubana Solidarity Call for the Cuban Family. We're going to hear from some fantastic speakers this afternoon. We're going to hear about conditions in Cuba right now. We're going to hear about the U.S. sanctions and the blockade against Cuba. And we're going to talk about and hear from some activists here in the United States who are organizing to change that reality. So my name is Simon, Simon Elliott. I'm based here in Minneapolis. I organize with the Party for Socialism and Liberation, and I'm a member of the Solidarity Committee on the Americas, which is a Minnesota-based solidarity committee that stands in solidarity with countries in Latin America and across the world against U.S. imperialism and organizes against U.S. imperialist aggression. So we are here today because this has been a very difficult time for the Cuban people due to U.S. sanctions against Cuba. And these sanctions, this blockade, has led to a scarcity of food, medicine, fuel, and other essential supplies. The increasing aggressiveness of U.S. policies and sanctions is trying to put maximum pressure on Cuba and other countries, for example, Venezuela. And this has caused huge challenges for Cuba and its people. And as we know, who is it that suffers from sanctions? It's the people. It's everyday people. Some of the most recent aggression by the Trump administration includes restarting Cuba's inclusion on the state sponsor of terror list, the SSOT. It also includes preventing people from receiving remittances. And there are plans for ending U.S. travel to Cuba or restricting it. And the U.S. is making it harder for Cubans to travel to the United States to visit family here. We've seen the U.S. Begin to deport Cubans living here back to Cuba, economic migrants alongside Venezuelans, Haitians, and people from countries across the world. So today we'll hear more about the Force Act. We'll hear later on more about that from at least one of our speakers, and such other, aggressions on behalf of the Trump administration. Yet, despite all of this, so many people continue to travel to Cuba and continue to be inspired by the Cuban people and their revolution. The Cuban people are strong and are dealing with these challenges as best as they can. But you all are not here to listen to me today. Instead, we're here to learn from an incredible lineup of activists, organizers, diplomats, and one Cuban piano legend, Nachito Herrera. So each speaker will speak for 10 minutes, and I'm asking our compañeros to respect that timeline. And then we will have a Q&A at the end. So if you are not one of our named speakers, I ask that you please stay on mute so that we're not getting any background noise. And for the Q&A, the way we want to do it today is we want to ask that folks put their questions in the chat, and I will be collecting questions out of the chat to ask to our panelists. So with that introduction, and I believe all of our speakers are here. Welcome, Danny, and I believe Cheryl's here as well. I will introduce our first speaker. So our first two speakers are Nachito Herrera and his wife and manager, Aurora Gonzales. Since Cuba has been suffering from shortages due to the U.S. blockade, the two of them have been bringing humanitarian aid to the island, and today they will share their testimony from their musical tour of Cuba, where Nachito is well known for his music, as he is well known here as well, and discuss their humanitarian aid campaign. So, adelante, compañeros.
Hola, buenos días, buenas tardes, buenas noches, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I don't know where you guys are all located, but well, yes, my name is Nachito Herrera, and I'm a Cuban pianist. I have been living in Minnesota, United States for the last 24 years. So yes, definitely, even before COVID-19, Aurora and I committed ourselves to this personal humanitarian missions we have been doing for several years already. But after the COVID-19, so during the pandemic, we started to hear the whole critical situation was in our country. And we also start to do some different type of fundraisers, always offering myself doing concerts, raising money, to being able to purchase a different medical supplies and actually music instruments for a different music conservatories in the island. And every single time we go there, we can see like how the critical situation is for the health and actually for the music conservatories there. So my personal experience is it is always using the music as a language, is putting all people together and not dividing. And I have been able, with a strong collaboration of another institution here from the Twin Cities called Matter, we have been able to bring 1,000 pounds of medical equipment and medical supplies, music instruments to different hospitals around the island. So far, we have been trying to cover different hospitals like in Pilar del Rio, Santa Clara, Santiago de Cuba, Granma, and then trying to cover the needs of different music conservatories like in Havana City, Amadeo Rodán, Escuela Nacional de Arte, la Escuela, el Conservatorio de Música in Santiago de Cuba too. So has been a long journey, but just with a strong faith, like this is, the right way to do. Not just with Cuba. Aurora and I has been committed to different humanitarian missions through our organization Matter to even help countries all around the world. It is around 66 countries around the world, including countries from Africa like Zimbabwe, Namibia, Congo, Angola. So it is definitely a hard situation what is happening. There is no doubt for anybody. Like the blockade, it is definitely hurting. The people of Cuba has been more than 6 decades right now. We have been under that horrible blockade, which it is not allowing the government to go ahead and purchase lots of things that our people need. All we do through the different foundations and organizations, and also through our church, because we are member of Minneapolis Presbyterian Church. That it is always bring these humanitarian missions to our country and all the people that need it around the world. The histories, I can tell you lots of great histories because using my music, I have been able to be around lots of great people. They love Cuba. They love our people in Cuba. And like I always said, even in Cuba or out of my country, I always said, like the people, we don't establish any difference in between the color of skin or political ideas or religion ideas. We are just a couple of Cuban. We love, to live in peace. We love to help people, and that's exactly what I have been doing for many years of my life. All I want to continue to do, and specifically like what I was saying before, even today we are in some point like celebrating like 5 years ago, I was fighting for my life. I was one of the first presidents to get COVID-19 in Minnesota. Even things, and I have to say it, thanks to the collaboration in between the medical teams in between Cuba and United States, I was able to 14 days later to get off of coma and open my eyes, and then continue this humanitarian mission. So we are celebrating, and this is definitely one of the things I really would like to continue to do. I could definitely, keep talking for a really long time and telling lots of histories about the wonderful experience we have been having all around the world. I know there are other people need to speak too, and all I want to say that from the bottom of my heart, I want to continue to offer my music, which I always said, like, I want to continue to say, and I will continue to say, like, I study at the music conservatories in Cuba from the beginning through the end. All my classical piano career was at the music conservatories in Cuba until I get 2 doctorate degrees at the University of Art. As something has been helping me to travel all around the world and play my music for lots of people all around the world. That's nothing I am going to erase from my career because I'm not seeing the reason why. And all I want to continue is continue to pray, because that's something I think we need to do too, really continue to pray for things to get better. And I'm hoping, honestly, sometime, hopefully soon, reestablish the relationship of the both administrations and either Cubans to visit United States with any kind of restriction, and also Americans being able using, they're using our constitutions and to go and travel to Cuba, because I always say we have nothing against the people of the United States. We love everybody. We welcome everybody, and that's something I pray every single day of my life, to see like it is all entire, angers and the whole entire arguments get done soon, because no matter what, we are just one type of people in all the world. We are just people. So thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. I hope, Simon, I didn't exceed your 10 minutes. And right now, it is my pleasure to introduce somebody has been one of my biggest inspiration and motivation to continue to do this humanitarian mission we have been doing for many years. Somebody, I think I am one of the luckiest person in the world, because has been in my life for more than 35 years. He gave me 2 wonderful kids. And then it is the person always come with this all magic ideas. Like lots of people said, if it's something she cannot to make it happen, it would never happen around the world, because her energy is amazing and her ideas are always like great. So is somebody has been in, like I said, in my life for more than 35 years, my wife, Aurora, the manager and head of these all things. Muchas gracias.
Good afternoon, and I am trying speaking Spanglish. For a lot of people is connect not speaking English very well. Natural translation for me, I am trying speaking Spanish. Mi familia cubana, bienvenidos todos, porque creo que estamos todos aquí por una sola razón, y la razón es la verdad. La verdad que se impone ante todo el mundo, que Cuba tiene una familia muy grande. Así que Nachito va a traducirme para que aquellas personas que están conectados, que no hablan inglés, les llegue este mensaje. Espero que no sea muy largo, porque tengo muchas cosas dentro de mi corazón para transmitir. Así que voy a tratar de hacerlo un poquito slow para que Nacho pueda traducir, porque no tenemos un intérprete aquí profesional. Ojalá Franklin estuviese aquí con nosotros y lo hubiésemos tomado de traductor. Así que lo primero que voy a tratar de decirle es bienvenido, welcome for the Cuban family.
The first thing I want to definitely to say is welcome to the Cuban family.
La familia cubana no es solamente los cubanos que viven en Cuba.
The Cuban family is not about the Cubans who are living on the island in Cuba.
Somos todos los cubanos que nacimos en Cuba.
We are all the Cubans who have the opportunity to born in Cuba.
Todos los cubanos que tenemos descendientes en Cuba.
All Cubans, we still have some relatives. in Cuba.
Y las familias como la nuestra, que ya tenemos nietos que no nacieron en Cuba, pero son tan cubanos como nosotros.
And a family like our family, which is, and even now we have grandkids. They didn't born in Cuba, but they are still Cuban like us.
Y tenemos otra gran familia son todos los miembros de la solidaridad con Cuba.
And we have another huge family, which is all the members of different solidarity committees.
Ahí estamos viendo miembros de nuestra iglesia, de la cual Nachito y yo somos miembros de la iglesia Westminster Presbyterian Church en Minnesota.
We have representation of even other members of our Presbyterian Church in Minneapolis, the one we have been member for a really long time already.
Tenemos miembros del Comité de Solidaridad con Cuba de Minnesota.
We have actually the members of the Cuban Solidarity Committee from Minnesota.
Y tenemos muchos otros, la Asociación Cultural José Martí, que anda por ahí también, lo cual también somos delegados de ellos también.
And also, you know, the members of the Cultural Jose Marti Association, which we have the honor to be part of them too.
Tenemos una representación de nuestra embajada cubana,
We
porque
also
nosotros
have-
somos cubanos.
We also have a pleasure to have representation for our Cuban embassy in Washington, D.C. because we are Cubans.
Y queremos presentar a muchos otros que están ahí, que aunque no van a hacer un speak hoy, están atentos de qué vamos a hablar nosotros aquí hoy.
And of course, the other people are with us today, which even when they are not going to be speaking, you know, they decide to join us today.
Espero no haberme extendido en la presentación.
I'm hoping and I didn't do a very long, you know, introduction,
Pero es muy importante reconocer el trabajo de cada uno de los que están aquí hoy.
but it's very important to recognize that all the job that all people have been doing, you know, for us today.
Y no hablo solamente de un trabajo el cual es de un tiempo limitado de días.
I'm not talking about just the type of job we have been doing just for a limited time, like about days.
Hablamos de 67 años de lucha contra el bloqueo.
Has been more than, you know, almost 66 years sort of fighting against the blockade.
Yo nací con bloqueo
I born on the blockade.
y por bloqueo salí de Cuba.
Because of blockade, I have to go leave Cuba.
Y muchos de nuestros cubanos que tuvieron que emigrar han emigrado por ese bloqueo.
Lots of Cubans have been, you know, using the immigration and leave the island has been because of blockade.
Por eso, con fuerza moral, puedo decir
That's exactly why with my strong moral, I can say
que debemos, número uno, luchar y seguir luchando porque el bloqueo se elimine contra Cuba.
We need to continue to fight to end the blockade against Cuba.
Pero muchas de las otras restricciones que estamos enfrentando hoy
But lots of also another restrictions we are, you know, fighting today.
están afectando la familia cubana como nunca antes.
They are affecting the Cuba, like the Cuban family, as never has been happening before.
Ya no se trata solamente de afectar a los cubanos que se quedan en la isla.
So now it is not just the way to affect the Cuban decide to stay on their country, Cuba.
Estamos hablando de leyes que limitan el derecho de los ciudadanos americanos de este país de poder ir a Cuba.
Actually, it is the sanctions and restrictions of actually prohibiting Americans to visit our country, Cuba.
Y sobre todo las otras medidas que están tratando de implementar, de prohibir los viajes, de prohibir las remesas.
And also now getting worse because with the new sanctions, they are trying to impose prohibiting, you know, like flying to the island and prohibiting bringing or sending some help like money to the people in Cuba.
Nos convierten a todos en prisioneros de estas medidas.
So in some point, we all get, you know, kind of under the title of prisoners of these no-sense sanctions to Cuba.
Nos están convirtiendo en terroristas,
They are trying to convert us as a terrorist
porque al acusar a Cuba, que es mi patria, me están acusando a mí de terrorista también.
because accusing Cuba as a countries are supported to terrorism, it is pretty much calling us like terrorists too.
Amo a este país por todos los líderes, desde muchos pudiésemos mencionar muchos líderes en este país que fueron valientes.
I really love this country because all leaders that this country has been having, which we can mention lots of them.
Y no se dejaron, no permitieron que los abusaran, defendieron los derechos civiles de este país.
They actually didn't allow, to being abused, and they were defending, the human rights of this country.
El pueblo americano es un pueblo de líderes.
The American people are the people with lots of leaders.
Y por ese mismo concepto de liderazgo
And for that exactly the same type of concept,
es que muchos de esos miembros de esa comunidad se han unido a Nachito y Aurora a luchar a favor de Cuba.
that's exactly why lots of people, lots of members of that wonderful community decide to work together with Aurora and Nachito for that cause.
Con el respeto que todas las comunidades en este país se merecen,
With the respect of all communities in this country deserve,
debo decir que no ha habido una comunidad que haya sufrido tanto como los cubanos.
I would like to say probably it is not other community has been suffering a lot like Cubans
En estos últimos tiempos,
in this last month.
sobre todo hoy hace 5 años que mi esposo se levantó de un coma.
Today, my husband wake up from 14 days in coma.
Enfrentamos una pandemia, yo creo que la más grande de la época contemporánea en el mundo.
I think we were, part of one of the biggest pandemics, all around the world.
Y a Cuba se le negó el primer derecho que tiene cualquier ciudadano o ser humano en el mundo.
And Cuba was denying on get the first rights of any human beings in the world.
Que durante una pandemia pudiese recibir los mismos recursos que recibía cualquier otro país.
Like during the pandemic, Cuba was not able to receive any of the helps that lots of countries around, they were helping with the different resources.
Quiero decir hoy que hicimos hace 20 o 30 minutos una entrevista para Karen 11. Es un canal, como ustedes saben, de Minnesota.
So about 30 minutes ago, we actually did an interview for Care 11 channel, which is a local channel in Minnesota.
Que va a salir en el día de hoy entre las 6 y 7 horas central de Minnesota.
It is going to be broadcasting in between 6:30 and 7, like the Central Time.
Y hablamos de estas experiencias tan difíciles que enfrentamos los cubanos que vivimos en este país.
And we also talk about the very difficult situation and experiences that Cubans are, living in this country right now.
Sobre todo esa experiencia tan traumática de los cubanos que estábamos de este lado del mar.
Specifically, that very traumatic experience for the whole Cubans we were in this side of the
Que no
ocean.
podíamos ayudar en ese momento de la pandemia a los cubanos como queríamos.
We couldn't, help our people in Cuba and the way we were thinking and planning on doing.
Después de ver a tantos años a Cuba ayudando a tantos países.
After seeing Cuba helping many different countries around the world.
Un país terrorista no hace lo que hace Cuba.
A country is supporting the terrorism is not do what Cuba has been doing for decades.
Ayudar a otros.
helping other people?
¿Dónde estamos los religiosos del mundo? ¿Dónde estamos?
Where are all the people are religious on around the world?
A veces me pregunto eso porque el primer mandamiento de nosotros los religiosos es amar al prójimo como a uno mismo.
Because sometimes I bring the question to myself, because the very first commandment on the Bible is, love, the people like the way we love to us.
En nuestra experiencia yendo a Cuba en las misiones humanitarias después del COVID-19,
In our experiences that are helping the Cuba on our humanitarian missions.
Compañera, perdona, compañera, ya estamos a tiempo. We're at time now. Si quieres agregar último comentario, if you want to add one last thing, and then we'll move on. Thank
sí,
you.
en mi última, o sea, en nuestra experiencia yendo a Cuba después del COVID-19 que mi esposo se recuperó, nuestra experiencia
In our experience, going to Cuba and bringing these humanitarian missions specifically after I got recovered after the COVID-19.
fue bien importante de muchas maneras, pero la más importante para nosotros fue no lo que llevamos,
Was very important to go there, and the most important thing was not what we brought to Cuba.
sino lo que Cuba nos dio.
The most important thing was what Cuba gave us.
Es lo más importante para todos los cubanos que hemos vivido en Cuba
That's the most important for all Cubans we have been living
y
in
de
our
lo cual no
country.
los podemos olvidar.
And we will never forget
Lo
about
que
our
Cuba nos
people
ha
in
dado.
Cuba, what Cuba have been giving us.
Sobre todo en este momento que están haciendo las deportaciones de tantos miles de cubanos hacia Cuba que no tienen casa, que no tienen propiedades en
Specifically in
Cuba.
this time, right now, which thousands and thousands of Cubans, like other people in Latin America, they have been deported back to the island, and they have no houses, they have no way to support themselves.
Cuba les abrió la puerta a sus hijos otra vez. No les ha dicho, no vengan, que no tengo nada que darles.
Cuba opened the door to their son again, and Cuba didn't say, don't come here because I have nothing to give it to you.
Creo que por ahora es muy difícil para mí tratar de expresarme y mi esposo tener que traducir al inglés y se pierde mucho el sentimiento.
Yeah, it is kind of like difficult because my husband is translated and I don't want you guys lose my feeling.
Pero en español o en inglés,
But even in Spanish or in English,
Cuba no está sola.
Cuba is not alone.
Cuba no es terrorista.
Cuba is not terrorist.
Los médicos cubanos son enviados de Dios para salvar a otras vidas.
Cuban doctors are kind of like people have been sent in by God to save life around the world.
Espero que mi intervención haya sido muy larga y pueda seguir contestando las preguntas.
I hope my intervention on my speech is not too long, and I'm continue to answer any question.
Thank you so much, Aurora. Thank you, Nachito, for your speech and also your interpretation. Next up, we are going to hear from Yasser Ibarra. He is the first secretary of the Cuban Embassy to the United States. We're very honored to have him here, and he will speak with us today about U.S. sanctions and the blockade's effect on the Cuban people. Thank you, First Secretary.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me today, and thank you, Aurora and Nachito, for your words of inspiration. Please accept my fraternal and supportive greeting for a small corner of Cuba, the Cuban Embassy in the United States. Today, I address you with the mission of sharing a reality that have marked the life of our people for more than 6 decades. Economic, commercial, and financial blockade imposed by the U.S. government, as well as the policy of sanctions, hostile measures, and media campaign that seeks to suffocate our country and discredit our social achievement. The blockade is not just a single war or an abstract policy. It is a network of law and regulation that go far beyond a simple trade embargo. It is a systematic and sustained aggression, increasingly extraterritorial in nature, which entails the almost total prohibition of economic, commercial, and financial transactions between Cuba and the rest of the world. This policy affects all sectors: educational, health, food, the economy, scientific development, and above all, the daily well-being of every Cuban. Imagine the difficulty a country faces in acquiring the necessary medicine to treat illness or the essential spare part to keep critical medical equipment. This is the daily reality in Cuba, where the blockade hampers access to technologies and resources necessary to our country's development. Laws like the Helms-Burton Act even seek to penalize third country companies that invest or trade with Cuba, extending the extraterritorial reach of this restriction. This is when anti-Cuban people in Congress now are wanting to reinforce with the reintroduction of the Democracia Act bill. The extraterritorial nature of the blockade directly impacts in Cuban people's relationship with others around the world, and even when many deny it, it also has a harmful effect on the U.S. people themselves. Beyond the commercial blockade, the sanctions imposed by the U.S. government during President Donald Trump's first administration, which are also being renewed and strengthened in his second term, act as a severe financial tourniquet against my country. The objectives of these measures, carefully designed by members of the current administration, is to restrict Cuba's access to international markets, limiting our foreign investment, and making banking transactions extremely difficult. Key factors such as tourism, one of the island's main sources of income, are severely affected by travel restrictions and ban on airlines and cruise ships. The inability to international credit and make payment normally affect the development of infrastructure projects, the modernization of industries, and others. The fear of secondary sanctions discouraged numerous foreign companies from establishing trade or investment relations with Cuba, further exacerbating economic difficulties. One of the most reprehensive actions due to its violation of international law was the persecution of all shipments to Cuba starting in 2019. That year, only 23 vessels and 27 companies were penalized. Actually, I don't have an update now, but you can imagine the number today, especially in 2023 and 2024, when the sanction has been worse. The scope of this seemingly medieval persecution is outrageous. It seeks to instill fear and sanction everyone involved in supplying this important commodity to the country, from shipping company to insurance company, banks, individuals, even government. As we all know, this policy impacts the country's electrical energy situation, transportation, and food production, and cause constant blackouts that, of course, cause enormous discomfort among the population. The objective is simple, it's clear, to generate a social discontent and through social unrest to encourage the people themselves to blame my government for its inefficiency and inability to lead the country. While the Cuban people's resistance is undeniable, we cannot ignore the human cost of those policies. Add to this network of sanctions are the genocide effect of Cuba's inclusion on the list of state sponsors of terrorism, a deeply unjust and baseless decision. This arbitrary decision made from Donald Trump's first administration dramatically aggravates the effects of the blockade. In short, it seeks to insulate Cuba economically, socially, and diplomatically under a false pretext. These measures has enormous implications for various sectors, such as tourism. Overall, I wonder, how can a country that sends doctors, not bomb, that promotes education, no hate, be accused for a sponsor of terrorism? I join my voice in the Cuba off the SSOT list campaign. In parallel, we have witnessed a growing number of bills introduced in the US Congress seeking to further throw policy toward Cuba. From the Force Act to codify Cuba's inclusion in the terrorist list into law, the Democracia Act to reinforce the extraterritorial nature of the blockade, and other proposals to run from banning remittances to impose new travel restrictions. These are measures that do not punish a government, but rather directly impact Cuban families, both in Cuba and in the United States, and affect their relationship with the American family. Those are laws that born from hatred, not from understanding. And all of this, as you well know, is accompanied by an intense media campaign orchestrated to demonize Cuba, manipulate the public opinion, and present a distorted image of our reality. The mainstream media repeat falsehood, silence our voice, and denies our achievement. A clear example is, like Aurora says, the media campaign is currently being weighed by the State Department itself to discredit the Cuban international medical collaboration. For decades, Cuban medical brigades have saved millions of lives in the neediest corners of the planet, from Latin America and Africa to Asia and Europe. Yet, this noble humanitarian work have been the target of slander promoted by sectors seeking to undermine the legitimacy of our cooperation, claiming without any evidence that it is forced labor or political intervention. I want to be clear, all Cuban health doctors collaboration who have joined the medical brigades are highly qualified, a fact recognized not only by the country where they work, but also by the World Health Organization. Furthermore, all Cuban doctors join the brigade freely and voluntarily, without any coercion, receiving the corresponding monetary compensation for the same as required by the contracts. The intention of this false campaign is also clear: to undermine one of the most solid examples of Cuban Revolution solidarity commitment, and in the process justify new international sanctions and pressure. In the face of this machinery, it is most necessary than ever to strengthen the bridge of love and solidarity between our peoples. It is also important to call on the voice of the US people in defense of the Cuban doctors. Dear friends, today we can say that given the constant internal demand that appears into this country, it seems the current administration has not taken direct action against Cuba. However, we perceive the covert behavior of anti-Cuban politicians in the government, with a leading role from the Department of State, whose quality seeks to target Cuba to prevent the international community and the US people from mobilizing in support of our country. From the first day of the Donald Trump administration to the present, we can count 9 measures against Cuba to harm us economic, limited people-to-people exchange, and grant our country international asylum. The actions include, of course, the re-inclusion of Cuba in the SSOT list for the first days of Donald Trump term, the reestablish in the list of the restricted Cuban entities with the inclusion of the remittances company to Cuba named Orbit, and the reactivation of the Title III of the Helms-Burton Act. Additionally, visas of people-to-people exchange have been suspended, and visa restrictions have been announced for Cuban foreigners and their families linked to international programs and agreements with Cuba. This includes, of course, Cuban medical cooperation, which, in addition to the disinformation campaign, has since a deployment of US diplomats to intimidate governments that have held agreement with Cuba, even those that no longer have them in force. Currently, threats to deportation against Cubans who do not have legal status of permanent residency in the United States are increasing. It is intimidation against Cuba and also Americans who travel to Cuba to visit their relatives, conduct business, or simply exchange with different sectors of the Cuban society. The Cuban government claims there is no cooperation on migration, ignoring the migration agreement and the talks on topics that have been taking place twice a year since 19th. Incidentally, the next round of migration talk is scheduled for this month. However, The current government has shown no signs of interest in the issue, instead accusing Cuba of not cooperating of migration issues. Something similar is happening with a change regarding law enforcement and compliance with issues such as terrorism, drug trafficking, human trafficking, and other crimes. The current government unilaterally suspend the exciting mechanism, claiming that Cuba is a threat to national security and calling us a foreign adversary. Friends have no doubt that it is all a strategy to increase hostility and limit exchange between the two countries, justifying, of course, by crazy campaigns and lies such as the existence of Chinese military bases in Cuba, for example. They say that we support financially the Hamas movement and others. In short, the economic blockade, financial sanctions, and hostile U.S. policy have imposed and continue to impose a heavy burden on Cuba. It is imperative to encourage a profound reflection of the consequences of those policies and explore alternative paths based on dialogue, mutual respect, and the search of solutions that benefits both people. The lifting of the blockade and the normalization of relations could open a new chapter of cooperation and progress for Cuba, the U.S., and the region in general. History teaches us those walls sooner or later come down. That is why today I want to take this beautiful opportunity to express our deepest gratitude to the people of the United States, to the Solidarity Movement, to the organization, church, union, Association of Cuba residing in the United States, and to so many people who, with their voice, their action, and their donation, have demonstrated that the friendship between our people is stronger than any wall. Thank you for the achievement of medicine, for the public statement, for the necessary caravans calling for an end to the blockade, for every gesture of humanity. You are proof, the real proof that another path is possible, a path of dialogue, respect, and cooperation, a path where dignity prevails, not imposition, truth, not manipulation. We urge to you to continue working together in unity and diversity, to lift the blockade, to remove Cuba from the infamous list of sponsors of terrorists, and for relations between our people to flourish. History calls us, humanity needs us, and solidarity, as our commander-in-chief Fidel Castro Ruz said, is the tenderness of people. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, First Secretary Ibarra. There's so many people around this call who've dedicated their lives to organizing in defense of Cuba, in defense of the Cuban people, to continue with what you're urging us to do. There's certainly so many people here in Minnesota and across the country doing that. And one of those people is Cheryl LaBash. She is a longtime solidarity activist who's done work around Cuba. She's involved in solidarity work in Detroit and is the co-chair and an active leader of the National Network on Cuba, the NNOC. She will discuss what the solidarity movement here in the United States is thinking about in terms of taking action, talk about the Saving Lives campaign, and more, I'm sure. So Cheryl, about 10 minutes, if you can keep to that. Thank you so much. Looks like you are muted. Are you
there? I was saying, I was trying to find the unmute button. Probably less than 10 minutes, but first I want to thank the people who have brought together this wonderful opportunity to talk more and expand our networks. The Solidarity Committee on Latin America and the Minnesota Cuba Coalition. But I want to start by saying I'm grateful and honored to meet Nachito and Aurora. I remember those days 5 years ago. I remember them like they're burned in my heart. The victory over COVID you won was an inspiration to the National Network on Cuba's Saving Lives campaign, an example of what miracles honest collaboration between countries can achieve. The National Network on Cuba is an all-volunteer umbrella organization with all who are working to normalize US-Cuba relations and the economic war imposed by the United States, return the occupied territory of Guantanamo, and to establish full travel rights to Cuba. We believe the people of the United States oppose the starvation campaign that's in place since the secret Mallory memo 65 years ago. Our work is to engage and organize this opposition in travel to Cuba, material aid, and making our voices heard in Congress. Examples of this are educational online events like this one, the recent US-Cuba Normalization Conference held in New York City, public-facing demonstrations in caravans, and outreach through teach-ins, tables at other social justice events, and social media. Especially in recent times, since the maximum pressure campaign followed the brief relaxation of the blockade following that bilateral announcement on December 17, 2014, material aid, especially medical aid, is a priority for solidarity organizing in the United States. The Saving Lives campaign was initiated by the NNOC, the Canadian Network, and the Quebec-Cuba Solidarity organization there. We worked throughout the COVID lockdown, educating about Cuba's medical brigades, the COVID protocols that Cuba was establishing and succeeding. In that first year, only 149 Cubans died. And we watched the pain that Cuba felt with every one of those deaths. We saw the vaccine projects developing, the work of Elam grads in many cities across the United States. We, in fact, publicized that in 2017, Cuban doctors had served in Chicago. We called for them to help in the underserved Black cities like Detroit and the indigenous reservations that were facing staggering death tolls from COVID. Together, the Saving Lives campaign on behalf, I mean, it really was the whole solidarity movement, sent 8 million syringes to help deliver the life-saving vaccines that Cuba had developed. Then we worked on a campaign to send anesthesia machines, and now pacemakers in a partnership with Medicuba Europa. So then the campaign sent anesthesia machines, now pacemakers in this partnership. Recently, concerts for Cuba in the Bay Area, Chicago, and New York had fundraising concerts with Cuban musicians, and then broadcast a composite raising material aid funds for the People's Forum and Global Health Partners. It's been a major part of our work to find a way to do what we can to undermine the blockade. We look forward to strengthening and expanding the existing material aid efforts with the help of US graduates from Elam. We had a wonderful example of what could be done just a few weeks ago, where tons of pain relievers were trucked from Los Angeles to the Gulf Coast for shipment to Cuba. It wasn't just the precious pain medication. It was possible to build new solidarity organizing centers in cities along the way, which is going to help us expand our efforts here in the United States. Travel to Cuba is an important priority. Seeing Cuba for yourself is often a life-changing experience and another vehicle for material aid. Literally hundreds of travelers from the United States are going to Cuba next week to celebrate May Day. Many, if not most, will carry suitcases with medical supplies from volunteer organization, not just tourists, or aid that has been gathered on their own. The direct flights to Cuba ease travel and are especially important, as Aurora was talking about, for Cuban families in the United States who long to visit their relatives on the island. NNOC member organizations have made YouTubes and podcasts to promote travel and solidarity, and encourage it in so many ways, not only the solidarity movement, but every way that's respectful. People who see Cuba through travel learn about Cuba and the responsibility for the damage the US policy has made and tries to hide. These travelers are often willing to speak up in their communities and tell the truth about Cuba. And also they're willing to talk to their elected officials locally and in Congress. NNOC member organizations in Minnesota, California, and Massachusetts especially have made great strides in working with elected officials, both on the local, the state, and the federal levels about Cuba, an example for other areas to emulate. As I said in the beginning, we are confident that the people living in the United States do not support the asphyxiation, suffocation, or starvation of the Cuban people. It's way beyond polls. We've collected 117 resolutions, primarily from elected governments and labor bodies, from city councils, from county commissions, from school boards, from actually from legislatures too. It represents more than 60 million people in this country, which is not a small factor. These are tangible facts. They're places where we set the flag of solidarity, and say, look, you can do this too. We do not have to tolerate our government working against the Cuban people, hurting the Cuban people, and doing this in our name and with our money. These are tangible facts, these resolutions, that elected officials and others in our union or our community organization can see that they too are not alone when we ask them to take a stand. I know that our next speaker is going to talk more about what's being done about our current challenge that people in Congress want to put Cuba permanently on that spurious list of state sponsors of terrorism. So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Cheryl. Our next speaker, Cheryl started the introduction, is Danny Valdez. He is the co-chair of the Democratic Socialists of America International Office, and he is here to speak about congressional advocacy for Cuba and the campaign opposing the Force Act. So, Danny, the floor is yours.
Hello, comrades. Hello, everybody. Buenos dias. Buenas tardes. My name is Danny. As Simon said, I'm the co-chair of the Cuba Solidarity Working Group inside of DSA. I'm also Cuban American. I grew up in Miami. I have Cuban background, so I guess I'm also Cuban, as was pointed out earlier. I want to say first that like it can feel overwhelming, like the amount of desperation that our country is inflicting on Cuba, and I feel like we spend a lot of time talking about that aspect of it, but we should also, I think it's important to have an action plan going forward, and try to think strategically to make, the best out of a kind of an impossible situation that we all find ourselves in under this current administration. And I want to also point out that like it was the work of DSA and every group in this, every solidarity group in the movement, and our pressure on the Biden administration that I think did result in a win last year, right? I think that's something we should keep in mind, yes, it was short-lived, and yes, it was way too little, way too late, but we did manage to, convince or pressure the president of the United States to really take a different tact in the United States's approach to Cuba by starting the process of removing Cuba from the SSOT list and other advancements, or would have been advancements in the relationship. So I know we're in a different political situation now, and perhaps our tactics and the way that we're thinking should be more varied, but we can have an effect, and it is possible for these two countries to have a perfectly normal, non-coercive relationship that would be mutually beneficial to everybody. And I think that's the thing we should always keep in mind. And yeah, I want to talk a little bit also about the Force Act, which, if you don't know, is a bill that was reintroduced. It's been introduced a couple of times in the U.S. House of Representatives. And what it basically does is it removes the president's authority to remove Cuba specifically from the state sponsors of terrorism list. So rather than it be an executive action like it is right now that at least initiates that process, it would become an act of Congress in order for Cuba to be removed from the state sponsors of terror list. Obviously, making it much more of a hurdle to overcome. As we know, once anything related to the embargo becomes law, it becomes that much more difficult to undo. And so the bill has not moved very much as of now. Many people that I've talked to who know about this sort of thing don't really think it has legs. But that said, I think it's still worth starting our opposition to it and thinking about how we're going to oppose it now, because it might not be this year, but who knows, right? And with the pace that things are changing every single day, as under this administration, we just never know what's around the corner. So we are at DSA, we're doing two things. One is we are mounting a letter campaign, which we did during the SSOT, our SSOT campaign. It worked really well. We managed to send, I think, close to 3,000 letters to the White House, to members of Congress, urging and putting pressure on President Biden to remove Cuba from the SSOT. So this is a similar action. This tool that I just linked will actually look up who your representatives are based on your address. It has a pre-formatted letter that you can just press send, and it will send it to your member of Congress. There are different letters depending if you have a Republican or a Democrat in office. We're making slightly different pitches for it. And the letter asks them to just oppose the HR 450, which is the Force Act, and support Senator Wyden's bill, which is a Senate bill, which is a bill basically calling for the end of the U.S. blockade and normalizing relations between the two countries. So that's a start. The more letters we can get in, the better. Just so that members of Congress know that, hey, we haven't forgotten. This is still on our radar. It's still something that we're looking out for. And it's a good way to, it's a good base to escalate from. So usually in DSA, we always have these letter campaigns as part of what we're doing. So sign those letters, fill them out, and take that link and spread it far and wide. Actually, there's two more things that we're doing. The other one is we're gathering folks who live in districts that overlap with people on the Foreign Relations Committee, and trying to get direct constituent meetings with those representatives, so that those representatives can hear from their constituents that they want relations with Cuba to be normalized. Again, it's another way of building pressure. And the third thing that we're doing is obviously like political education, which I think is a big component of that is necessary for most Americans, as you guys have all had the experience of, didn't Obama end the embargo? So I think it's really important that we educate people about what the current state of the blockade is. It's actually worse than it's ever been, right? So in the opposite of what a lot of people think it is. And I wanted to just put in one final plug. We are having a special event at the embassy. Speaking of that political education, that is supposed to be kind of a cross-cultural exchange. It'll be a Cuban rum tasting. There'll be dancing, there'll be dance lessons. And again, the goal here is to try to expand our coalition, right? Because I think that needs to be another huge focus of the next 4 years, is expanding who knows about what's going on in Cuba and expanding the coalition of people who are involved in the Cuba Solidarity Campaign. Specifically, I think Cuban Americans. I think Cuban Americans, you know, my age, 40 and younger, have a very different. Even if it's I don't really know, like that's an opening for us, right? You know, a lot of us grew up hearing pretty horrible things about Cuba our entire young lives. But many of us are in a place, you know, where Cuba is just kind of this thing that belonged to my grandparents and my parents and whatever. But I think there's opportunity to connect people with their roots and to also politicize the situation in a way that leads them to understand that many of the things you grew up hearing about Cuba that were bad are directly or indirectly a result of U.S. foreign policy, and the fact that Cuba was not allowed to develop as a sovereign country. Yeah, so that's what we're up to in the short term. I'm sure there will be more in the long term. Please visit those 2 links that I put in the chat. We'd love to have your participation. And one more link I will drop for my fellow Cuban Americans is this website, CubanAmericansForCuba.org, which is a group that I've put together to try to gather as many Cuban Americans as possible, so that we can discuss and strategize about how to be at the forefront of this movement, which I think is what needs to happen in order for it to really gain. It's a critical. Cuban Americans are a critical missing voice, I think, it's in this coalition, and I think we need to do the work of bringing them in on their own terms, which we know are like kind of special and difficult to navigate sometimes. Yeah, that's it. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Danny. Listening to you and listening to you, Cheryl, there's so much happening in the solidarity, in the movement here in the United States, to help lift the blockade against Cuba. One of the things that I know I benefited from greatly was the opportunity to travel to Cuba, and to see the conditions for myself and to speak with people in Cuba, and then to be able to come back and share about my experience, what I saw, and why the blockade needs to be lifted now, and at that time, why Cuba needed to be removed from the state sponsor of terrorism list. I'm wondering, I know there's some names around this who I know for a fact have not made it to Cuba yet. What are some upcoming opportunities for travel to Cuba for folks? And what are the conditions for travel now, given the Trump administration? And that question could be for anyone who feels equipped to answer it of our panelists. Go for it, Cheryl.
Well, right now there's the Mayday Brigade. And there are, well, it's not only the Mayday Brigade, there are a lot of people traveling to Cuba for Mayday. The National Network on Cuba helps to organize participation in the International Mayday Brigade that is organized by the Cuban Institute for Friendship with the People. In addition to that, the CTC has delegations coming. They have classes for work, especially young workers, and programs that are oriented to learning about unions in Cuba, which is another point that occasionally gets attacked by the U.S. lie machine. Upcoming, though, July 26th, if you want to go on an organized group, July 26th, the Venceremos Brigade is having a small brigade. And then in December, it's the 65th anniversary of ECAP, the Cuban Institute for Friendship with the People. And we're going to be going back to Cuba. And we're going no matter what the conditions are. It's never stopped us before, this thing of legal travel that we're going to fight for and fight to maintain. But this thing of legal travel has not existed always. And I've traveled both ways, through Mexico, through Canada, through Jamaica. We don't know what that's going to change either. But right now, it's possible. Support for the Cuban people is the way people are going. People are having a little difficulty coming back, but if you go with an organized brigade or a delegation that does preparation, it's quite safe. If you are a US citizen and you land in the United States, eventually they have to let you go back to your home. You know, they may question you, they may not question you, but they may search your luggage. They will take your rum and cigars if you try to bring them. But really, it's more intimidation, especially if you're young. Nothing really to worry about thus far. Really, we have to assert our rights. So those are the things that are coming up. You can organize your own group, your family. You do not have to be part of a, and honestly, the National Network on Cuba supports all travel that is respectful of Cuba, that's respectful travel. It's going to honestly experience Cuba and the wonderful friendship that the Cuban people offer.
Thank you, Cheryl. The next question is for Nachito and Aurora. What opportunities are there here in Minnesota for folks local to support your work? And any fundraisers, any events? Nachito, maybe a concert coming up that you want to put on the radar of people here in Minnesota? How can we support your work? You're muted. You could unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I'm sorry. Yes, actually, we are now, this meeting is actually happening on the day before I will do a concert tomorrow for people live in the cities. I will be performing tomorrow at the Dakota Jazz Club in Minneapolis. It is on 10th and Nicollet. I think the people live in Minneapolis, they are very familiar with the Dakota. And actually on different TV screens, we are going to be posting a link they will be able to make the donations to this organization I mentioned before. The organization is Matter, Matter. And when you go to the Matter website, also you will be directed to a link. It is actually the making a donation specifically for Cuba. You know, you will see a picture of myself, biographies, and all information about different humanitarian missions we have been doing for the last few years, bringing 1,000 pounds of medical supplies and equipment and music instruments. Besides that, we also we always go at the beginning of a year all the time, and like every year we go kind of at the middle of January because it is a celebration of the International Havana Jazz Festival, which I have been having a possibility and the honor to be invited to perform there in Cuba. Always a great opportunity to get together with lots of friends. We went to the school together, and at the same time, during the whole entire period of year, we posted on our website, nachitoherrera.com, possibilities of do like fundraisers and direct to people to the website in Matter to donate money. During the whole year, what we do is raise that money and purchase lots of items and medical equipment and supplies so we can bring at least personally, and I want to be specific, at least personally, we try to bring it at least once a year. But and then, you know, it is different, like several achievements we do during the whole year to our country. Like I was mentioning before, and you know, I also want to thank, you know, Cheryl and Danny and all the people who have been, you know, supporting my Cubans. I think one of the most critical situations right now, the country, besides to continue to fight to get in Cuba, you know, out of SST and things like that, it is actually that many Cubans are being deported, and we don't know. I don't know if this is going to continue to happen. So we want to be able through churches and through the solidarity committees and everything to be able to offer myself personally to continue to work and make some fundraisers and create some concerts which we can continue to help La Familia Cubana, the Cuban family. Like I said before, you know, for my start point, I'd never like to establish any difference in between the color of skin or political ideas or religious ideas. I think we are all Cubans, it doesn't matter, you know, not all your ideas. And I think that our people in Cuba right now are gonna need more than one help, more than one hand help, because those families, for whatever reasons, they established a dream, like they were selling their properties and everything in Cuba, and they decided to go to a different country, and now to be forced to, in some point, to return back to the country. Cuba is open the door. Cuba is welcome them again. It's just a matter of fact that how we in this side of the world, we can actually help them to at least, you know, have something to start. So that's, I don't know if that answered the question, but yeah, tomorrow at the Dakota Jazz Club, I will be performing and actually put it on the screens and on Facebook and all medias, you know, like our Cuban page at Matter Foundation. And the people can definitely make a donation. And one of the most important thing with Aurora and all team there, they always document everything. So it is something we have that on our rule. Like if people will see, you know, where the money has been going through. And Aurora and I want to say it again, we are volunteers. So we don't charge. When I do my fundraisers, my performance to raise money for my people in Cuba, I don't charge any money for that. You know, it is all from my heart. And I am so glad, you know, the music I played, it looks like a lot of people like it. And that's what we want to continue to do.
Thank you so much. So looking at the clock, I know we were going to try to stick closer to an hour, and here we are close to an hour and a half. So I'm gonna move us to close. I want to thank everyone so much. I apologize for the abbreviated question and answer, but I want to thank everyone so much for coming. I want to extend a special thank you to our panelists, Aurora, Nachito, Yasser, Danny, and Cheryl, so much for sharing your expertise. There's so much information in the chat, links that were being shared, but I want to direct people who are local to Minnesota to join the Minnesota Cuba Committee, to join us in SCOTA, the Solidarity Committee on the Americas, to attend Nachito's concert tomorrow night. Travel to Cuba, sign all of the petitions and letters that Danny shared in the chat, follow the work of the NNOC, of the DSA Cuba Working Group, travel to Cuba. And also, I want to share that the Minnesota Cuba Film Festival here in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, is starting on April 30th, and it will go until June 4th. It'll be every Wednesday at 7 at the main cinema. They'll be showing some incredible Cuban films, and we'll be there, and we can all be there together and continue to scheme how we can build this movement stronger, how we can organize together, and how we can see thriving Cuba off of the SSOT list with the Force Act defeated, and space for Cuba and the Cuban people to thrive. So thank you all so much. We will see if we can get a list of everyone who attended emails to follow up with some of these links. But I know we're over Zoom, but if we could do some little applause for those of us who are on camera, for our panelists. Thank you so much, and have a lovely rest of your day. Thank you, compañeros.
You also, gracias.
Viva
Adiós.
Cuba!
Viva Cuba!
Viva!
Bajo Dios.